The war had been going on for 3 long years. Humanity was losing. The Vakreen Empire, with their powerful ships and advanced weapons, had pushed human forces back across 12 different star systems. Every week brought news of another colony lost, another battle defeated. The people of Earth were tired, scared, and running out of hope. In a large meeting room on the Aurora space station, military leaders gathered around a glowing table. Admiral Gregory Stone stood at the head, his face showing the weight of every soldier lost under his command. The holographic display behind him showed the current situation. Red dots represented enemy fleets. Blue dots showed what remained of Earth's navy. There were far more red than blue. Gregory cleared his throat and began speaking. We received a message from the Vakreen High Command this morning. They want to talk about ending the war. They asked us to send one person to negotiate. Just one person, on their command ship called the Shattered Crown. The room filled with worried whispers. Senator Linda Hayes leaned forward in her chair. One person? That doesn't sound right. What else did they say? One. They said minimal security, no weapons. They claim it's to show good faith, Gregory answered. Though his voice made it clear he didn't trust this claim, General Victor Kane slammed his fist on the table. It's obviously a trap. They'll capture whoever we send and force us to surrender completely. A calm voice came from the back of the room. Everyone turned to look at Daniel Price, humanity's top diplomat. He was a thin man in his 40s, with sharp gray eyes. Maybe it is a trap, Daniel said quietly. But if there's even a small chance we can stop this war without losing another 1,000,000 lives, we have to try. Gregory nodded slowly. We already voted on this. Daniel, you're our choice. You've made peace treaties with 6 different alien species. If anyone can handle the Vakreen, it's you. Daniel stood up and adjusted his formal jacket. When do I leave? In 36 hours. The ship Valiant will take you to the meeting point. After that, you'll get on a Vakreen transport. Gregory's expression softened a bit. Daniel, be careful. The Vakreen only respect strength. If you show any weakness, they'll destroy you. That night, Daniel sat in his small room looking at everything humans knew about Vakreen culture. His assistant, a young woman named Claire Murphy, brought him the newest reports. The Vakreen have a strict ranking system, Claire explained, pointing at her screen. Warriors are at the top. Workers are at the bottom. Their leader, Warmaster Kreth, became the boss by winning personal fights. He's never lost a single duel. So I'm walking into a room full of people who think talking is for the weak, Daniel said. Basically, yes. But there's something else. Claire opened a secret file. Our spies think there are problems inside the Vakreen command. Some of their leaders want to keep fighting. Others think humans are too expensive to conquer. Daniel's eyes got narrow. Internal fighting. That might help us. The next day, Daniel called his daughter Amy on video. She was 17 years old, living in a protected shelter on Mars, with millions of other people who had to leave their homes. Dad, please stay safe, she said, her voice shaking. I will, sweetheart. And when I come back, maybe we can finally go home. He smiled, even though he was terrified inside. The trip to the neutral zone took 14 hours on the Valiant. Captain Helen Moore, a serious officer with 20 years of experience, met him on the bridge. We'll get you as close as we can, Ambassador Price. After that, you're in their hands. She gave him a small device. This is a neural transmitter. If things go wrong, just think the activation code, and we'll know to rescue you. But it only works once. After that, you're alone. Daniel put the device in his pocket. Let's hope I don't need it. When the Vakreen transport ship got close, Daniel stood in the airlock with his 2 security guards. They were Marines, named Jake Collins and Peter Wright. They were supposed to go with him as far as the Vakreen allowed. The transport was smaller than Daniel expected. The walls looked almost alive, glowing with soft light. 4 Vakreen soldiers met them at the entrance. Each one was over 7 feet tall, covered in armor that looked like colored glass. Their faces looked like giant insects. One of them spoke through a translation device. Jake stepped forward. "Our orders are to protect the ambassador." The Vakreen's mouthparts clicked in what might have been laughter. "Your orders mean nothing here. He comes alone, or he doesn't come at all." Daniel put his hand on Jake's shoulder. "It's okay. Wait here." "Sir, this breaks all the rules," Peter protested. "The rules stopped mattering when we lost the Arcturus colonies," Daniel said quietly. "I'll be fine." As he followed the Vakreen deeper into their ship, Daniel studied everything. The way they walked, the way they talked to each other, where the weapons were kept, even if he failed to make peace. Any information he learned might save human lives later. The trip took 30 minutes. Finally, they arrived at a huge room with high ceilings. In the center was a raised platform, surrounded by dozens of Vakreen officers. And at the highest point stood War Master Kreth. He was massive, even bigger than the other Vakreen. His armor was deep red and covered in scars from old battles. On his head was a crown made of sharp crystal pieces. His 4 eyes locked onto Daniel with frightening intensity. "So," Kreth's voice boomed through the speakers, "Earth sends one small, soft creature to speak for billions. Should I feel insulted or amused?" Daniel walked closer to the platform, keeping his face calm. He knew his first words were crucial. Show respect but not fear. Show strength but not arrogance. "War Master Kreth, I come not as a small creature, but as the voice of humanity. We've held back your empire for 3 years, despite being outnumbered and outgunned." "I think another Vakreen stepped forward quickly. His armor had special symbols showing high rank. "Careful, human. You speak to the War Master with disrespect." Daniel turned to face this new speaker. "And who are you?" "Commander Zalth, First Talon of the Shattered Crown. I suggest you remember your place." "My place is here, trying to end a war that hurts both our peoples," Daniel replied calmly. Kreth raised one clawed hand, making Zalth go quiet. "Let him speak. I want to hear what peace terms a desperate species might offer." Daniel took a deep breath. This was the moment everything depended on. "We propose a ceasefire along current borders. The systems we're fighting over will be neutral zones for 10 years. No military from either side. After 10 years, we'll have joint meetings to decide final borders based on where civilians have settled." "You offer us nothing," Zalth growled. "I offer you an end to losses," Daniel said back. "Every day this war continues. You lose ships and warriors. Humanity has nowhere to run. We will fight to the last colony, the last ship, the last person. Even if you win, the cost will destroy your empire for generations." "He speaks truth about the cost," another voice said. A smaller Vakreen with silver-colored armor stepped forward. "I am Scholar Vren. Our calculations show that complete conquest of human space would take at least 5 more years. We would lose 70% of our fleet." "Scholar Vren speaks like a coward," Zalth shot back. "The Vakreen have never run from a fight." Zalth, 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 Zalth. "The Vakreen have also never fought a species that adapts so quickly," Vren replied. "Every time we develop a new tactic, they counter it within months. They use our own weapons against us. This enemy should not be underestimated." Daniel watched the argument carefully. The division Claire had mentioned was real. These Vakreen were fighting among themselves. Kreth stayed quiet, letting his officers argue. "Perhaps," Kreth finally said, his voice cutting through the debate, "we should test the humans' determination more directly. Daniel Price, you claim your species will never surrender. But will you personally die for that claim? The room went completely silent. Daniel felt his heart start beating faster, but he kept his voice steady. What do you mean, War Master? EB as ever one. Draumen to the voice. I'm one to thode. Graumen to the War Master. Kreth's mouth parts spread in what might have been a smile. A traditional Vakreen way of settling disputes. Single combat. You against Commander Zalth. If you win, we will seriously consider your peace terms. If you lose, Earth surrenders unconditionally. Sir, this is crazy, Vren protested. A diplomat cannot be expected to fight a trained warrior. Then he should not have come here claiming strength, Zalth said, his armor rattling with excitement. I accept the War Master's judgment. Will the human accept? Or will he prove his species are nothing but cowards? Daniel's mind raced. This was the trap he had expected. But refusing would destroy any chance of peace and prove he was weak. Accepting meant almost certain death. Zalth was a professional soldier. Daniel had only basic military training from years ago. But as he looked around the room, he saw something in Kreth's eyes. This wasn't really about the fight. It was about showing something to the divided Vakreen leadership. It was theater. 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 I accept, Daniel said clearly. With one condition. If I win, the ceasefire starts immediately. If I lose, my death satisfies Vakreen honor. But Earth gets 48 hours to consider surrender terms before any attacks continue. You still bargain? Zalth laughed. Fine. Not that it matters. You will be dead in minutes. Kreth nodded slowly. The terms are acceptable. The combat will happen in 1 hour. Prepare yourself. Human. Know that you face one of our finest warriors. Guards led Daniel to a preparation room. His hands shook slightly. He had just agreed to fight an alien super soldier with the fate of humanity, depending on the outcome. This was definitely not in any diplomatic handbook he had ever read. The preparation room was simple. It had racks of armor and weapons on the walls. A young Vakreen attendant stood quietly, pointing at the equipment. Daniel looked at the weapons with growing worry. They were all made for Vakreen bodies. Too heavy, too large, or shaped wrong for human hands. A crystal sword was beautiful, but weighed at least 40 pounds. The spear was 7 feet long, clearly meant for someone much taller. This is ridiculous, he whispered. Then he had a thought. This wasn't just about being strong. It was about understanding what your opponent expects and using that against them. He picked the lightest weapon available. It was a curved blade about 3 feet long, similar to a large knife. It was still heavier than any human weapon he had trained with, but he could manage it. For armor, he chose minimal protection. Just a chest plate and arm guards. Vakreen armor would slow him down more than protect him. The attendant made clicking sounds that seemed confused by his choices, but said nothing. Claire's voice suddenly came through his earpiece. He touched the small communicator, surprised it still worked. Daniel, we're watching from the Valiant. Captain Moore wants to pull you out. No, Daniel whispered. If I run now, the war continues, and we lose anyway. At least this way, there's a chance. A chance of you dying. Better me than millions. He paused. Claire, if I don't make it, tell Amy I tried my best. Tell her yourself when you get back. The line went dead. The hour passed too quickly. Guards came to take him to the arena. It was a large, circular space with seats going up in levels. Hundreds of Vakreen had gathered to watch. Daniel stepped onto the sandy floor and saw Zalth waiting at the other end. The commander had chosen full battle armor and a long, deadly-looking blade that seemed to hum with energy. He stood perfectly still, radiating confidence and power. Kreth's voice boomed across the arena. This combat is witnessed by the crew of the Shattered Crown. The terms are agreed. Daniel Price, of Earth, versus Commander Zalth, First Talon. The fight continues until one surrenders or dies. Begin. Zalth moved with terrifying speed. Daniel barely dodged the first attack, feeling the energy blade heat the air where his head had been a second before. The second attack came immediately, and Daniel blocked with his own blade. The impact sent shockwaves through his arms and made his bones hurt. "Too slow, human," Zalth's voice mocked as he kept attacking. Daniel moved backward, deflecting rather than blocking, using Zalth's own momentum against him. He had one advantage. Zalth expected him to fight like a Vakreen, with strength and direct attacks. Instead, Daniel would fight like a human, with tricks and adaptation. He let Zalth drive him backward, seeming like he was losing. The crowd's clicking got louder. Then, when Zalth put too much power into a downward strike, Daniel stepped to the side and slashed at the joint between the commander's arm and shoulder armor. His blade scraped against crystal but couldn't cut through. Zalth's armor was too strong. Zalth laughed and hit Daniel with his free hand. The impact sent the human flying across the sand. Daniel tasted blood and forced himself to roll away as Zalth's blade struck where he had been lying. The commander roared in pain and surprise. He was temporarily blinded. Daniel didn't waste a single second. He couldn't pierce the armor, but he didn't need to. He swept Zalth's legs with his blade, using the flat part of the weapon like a staff instead of trying to cut. The massive warrior crashed to the ground with a heavy thud that shook the arena floor. Before Zalth could recover, Daniel was on his back. He pressed his blade against the thin membrane at the base of Zalth's neck. It was one of the few spots on a Vakreen that had no armor protection. "Yield," Daniel gasped, barely able to breathe. "Or I press harder." The arena fell completely silent. Not a single click or whisper. Zalth's body went rigid under him. Daniel increased pressure just slightly, enough to draw a single bead of glowing blood. "I yield," Zalth finally said, his voice tight with shame and anger. Daniel immediately pulled back and stepped away. He nearly collapsed from exhaustion and the rush of adrenaline leaving his body. The crowd erupted in a storm of clicks and chirps. Daniel couldn't tell if they approved or were angry. Kreth walked down to the arena floor. His expression was impossible to read. Daniel braced himself, unsure if he had won peace or just signed his own death warrant in a different way. "The human fights with deception," Zalth spat as he got to his feet. "He fights with intelligence," Vren's voice called out from the crowd. "He used the environment and his opponent's expectations against him. That is not dishonor. That is strategy." Kreth stood between Daniel and Zalth, studying the human with new interest. Finally, he spoke. "For 3 years, we have wondered how such a weak species could resist the Vakreen Empire. Now I understand. You do not fight as we do. You fight as you are. Adaptable, unpredictable, unwilling to accept defeat." He turned to his assembled officers. Commander Zalth lost not because he was weak, but because he assumed his enemy would fight with strength. This is the lesson humanity teaches us. Kreeth faced Daniel directly. "You have won your combat, Ambassador Price. We will honor the terms. But I have a question. Was this courage or desperation?" Daniel met the War Master's eyes without looking away. "Both. We're desperate enough to try anything and courageous enough to face the consequences. That's why this war needs to end, War Master. Because we'll never stop trying, and you'll never stop bleeding." Kreth's mouthparts clicked in what Daniel was learning to recognize as thoughtful consideration. "Return to your ship, Ambassador. In 3 days, I will send my response to your peace terms. Until then, all military operations will stop." As guards escorted Daniel back through the ship, he let himself breathe properly for the first time in an hour. He had survived. The ceasefire had begun. But he knew this was only the beginning. The real negotiation was still ahead. The 3 days of ceasefire passed slowly and painfully. Daniel stayed aboard the Valiant, Going over every detail of his meeting with the Vakreen leadership, Captain Moore had wanted to return to safe space immediately, but Daniel insisted they stay in the neutral zone. If we leave, it tells them we don't trust them, he explained. Right now, trust is the only thing we have to bargain with. On the morning of the third day, a Vakreen shuttle approached. It had an unexpected passenger. Scholar Vren. This is strange, Moore said as they watched the approach on their screens. Why would one of their scholars ask for a private meeting? Daniel had a guess but kept it to himself. Let's find out. Vren arrived with only minimal guards and asked to speak with Daniel alone. In a secure meeting room, the scholar acted very different from how he had in Kreth's throne room. Ambassador Price, I come with information that may save or doom us both. Vren began without any polite introduction. The War Master is genuinely considering peace, but Commander Zalth and his supporters are planning to sabotage the negotiations. Daniel leaned forward. How? In 2 days, there is a scheduled joint meeting on a neutral station to formalize the ceasefire terms. Zalth has positioned ships nearby, under the excuse of standard patrols. During the meeting, he plans to kill both you and War Master Kreth, then blame humans for breaking the peace. This will give him the excuse to take command and continue the war. Why are you telling me this? It's treason against your own people. Vren's crystalline features somehow showed sadness. Because I am tired of war, Ambassador. The Vakreen have been conquering for centuries. It is all we know, but it is destroying us from the inside. Our homeworlds are neglected. Our culture is dying. Our people know nothing but military service. The scholar paused. You asked earlier why we called for negotiations. The truth is, our empire is falling apart. Resources are running out. Conquered worlds require constant military presence to prevent rebellions. We cannot keep this up forever. Daniel processed this carefully. So Kreth wants peace because the empire is stretched too thin? Yes. But he cannot admit this publicly without looking weak. That is why he staged your combat with Zalth. He wanted to show wavering factions that humans are strong enough, that peace with honor is possible. You were actually supposed to lose heroically. Your victory was unexpected, but served the purpose even better. That's why he asked if it was courage or desperation, Daniel realized. He was testing whether I understood the performance. Exactly. But Zalth saw only humiliation. He will not allow peace to happen. Vren produced a data device. These are the patrol routes and communication codes of Zalth's ships. If your fleet can stop his forces before the meeting, you can prevent the assassination. Daniel studied the device suspiciously. This could also be a trap. You could be feeding us false information to lure our ships into an ambush. I could, Vren admitted. You must decide whether to trust me. But consider this. If I wanted to trap you, why warn you at all? Why not simply let Zalth's plan happen? It was a good point. But Daniel had learned to be suspicious of things that seemed too convenient. What do you gain from this? Vren, what's your real reason? The scholar's mouth parts spread in what Daniel had learned was a Vakreen smile. A chance for my people to be more than warriors. A chance for our scholars, artists, and builders to matter as much as our soldiers. Peace with humanity opens possibilities. Endless war closes them. Daniel made his decision. I need to verify this information through our intelligence networks first. If it checks out, we'll act on it. Time is short, Ambassador. Zalth moves quickly. After Vren left, Daniel immediately contacted Fleet Admiral Gregory Stone through encrypted channels. The data was sent, and within hours, Earth's intelligence services confirmed that the patrol patterns matched known Vakreen movement signatures. The communication codes were real military protocols. It's real, Stone confirmed over the secure line. We can position the Fifth Fleet to stop Zalth's forces. But Daniel, this is dangerous. If we're wrong, we start the war again. If we do nothing and Vren is right, the war starts anyway, and Kreth dies. On the morning of the scheduled meeting, Daniel prepared to transfer to the neutral station. It was called Haven Point, a massive structure built centuries ago as a place for diplomatic meetings. Captain Moore insisted on doubling his security detail. "Jake and Peter won't be enough if this goes wrong," she said firmly. "You're taking a full squad of Marines." Daniel didn't argue. He knew she was right. The shuttle ride to Haven Point should have been calm. But as they approached, sensors detected multiple Vakreen ships moving toward the station. There were far more ships than the agreed-upon security presence. Zalth's making his move. Moore's voice came through the communication system. "Fifth Fleet is moving to intercept. Stay alert, Ambassador." Daniel's shuttle docked with the station at the same time as another transport. This one carried War Master Kreeth and his people. As both groups entered the main conference hall, Daniel caught Kreeth's gaze. There was a knowing look in those 4 eyes. He knows. Daniel realized. Kreeth knows about Zalth's plan. The meeting began with formal greetings and procedures, but tension filled the air like electricity before a storm. Representatives from both sides presented preliminary peace frameworks. Daniel noticed that none of Zalth's known supporters were in the room. Only Kreeth's loyal followers and moderate voices like Vren. Then warning alarms screamed throughout the station. Vakreen ships have opened fire on the station's defensive perimeter. A station security officer announced loudly. Kreeth rose to his full height, his expression showing pure anger. "Zalth." He forces my hand. Through the large viewport, Daniel watched as Earth's Fifth Fleet engaged Zalth's forces. The battle was brief, but intense. Explosions lit up the darkness of space. Within minutes, it became clear that Zalth's ships were outmaneuvered and outgunned. They had been caught by surprise. A communication came through from one of Earth's destroyers. "Commander Zalth's flagship is disabled. He's asking to speak with War Master Kreeth." Kreeth activated the communication channel. Zalth's image appeared on the screen. His armor was cracked and leaking glowing fluid. He looked beaten and desperate. "War Master, I acted to save the Empire. This human cannot be trusted," Zalth said. "You acted to save your own power," Kreeth replied coldly. "You have broken direct orders and attacked a diplomatic meeting under my authority. For this, you are stripped of all rank and command. You will face trial before the High Council. You would choose peace with prey over loyalty to your own kind?" Zalth snarled. "I choose the survival of the Vakreen Empire over the pride of one warrior," Kreeth said. "We have bled enough. Indefensible. Asapta Vakreen." The transmission ended abruptly. Kreeth turned to Daniel, and for the first time, the War Master's expression showed something like respect. "It seems we both had traitors to deal with, Ambassador. You knew of Zalth's plan. We had advance warning," Daniel said carefully. "Just as I suspect you did. Scholar Vren came to you. It wasn't a question. He came to me as well, 3 days ago. I wanted to see if you would act on the information, or use it as a weapon against me." Daniel felt his jaw tighten with controlled anger. This was another test. Everything is a test, Ambassador. War, peace, honor, survival. All tests. Kreeth gestured to the viewport where the battle had just ended. "But you passed. You could have let my enemies kill me, and tried to negotiate with a divided Vakreen command. Instead, you warned your fleet to protect this meeting. Why? Because peace with you is difficult. Peace with a broken Vakreen Empire would be impossible." Daniel met the War Master's gaze evenly. "We both want this war to end. That requires trust, even when it's dangerous." Kreeth's mouthparts clicked in what Daniel had learned to recognize as approval. "Then let us continue these negotiations. Ambassador, we have much to discuss." The formal peace negotiations lasted another 3 weeks on Haven Point. Every detail was argued, debated, and refined, over and over. Daniel spent 18-hour days working with Vakreen representatives to create agreements that both species could live with. The hardest discussions were about the contested systems. 12 star systems that both sides had claimed or fought over. Neither side wanted to look weak by giving up territory. It was Scholar Vren who proposed the solution that finally broke the stalemate. These systems are rich in resources but difficult to develop alone, Vren explained during one particularly difficult session. What if they were jointly managed? Both species contribute to development. Both share the benefits. Over time, this creates mutual investment in peace. Commander Nath, one of Kreth's senior officers, objected immediately. Vakreen and humans living close together? It would lead to conflicts. As opposed to the current situation where we're killing each other? Daniel replied with dry humor. At least joint management gives us a way to resolve conflicts without war. The human has a point, Kreth said. We either learn to live together, or we continue fighting until one side is destroyed. I would prefer the former. The joint management proposal was accepted, with strict rules for resolving disputes and clear limits on military presence. It wasn't perfect, but it could work. During the negotiations, Daniel had a private conversation with Vren in a quiet observation lounge. They looked out at the stars together. Why did you really help us? Daniel asked. The complete truth this time. Vren was silent for a long moment. I have a child. A young one, barely past her first molting. In Vakreen society, she would be expected to become a warrior, but she shows talent for science and building. Under our current system, her abilities would be wasted or ignored. The scholar's voice carried an emotion Daniel had never heard from a Vakreen before. I want her to live in an empire where she can be valued for her mind, not just her ability to fight. Peace with humanity offers that possibility. Daniel thought of Amy, waiting on Mars for him to come home. I understand completely. My daughter deserves a future without war too. Then we fight for the same thing, Ambassador, just with different methods. As the negotiations got close to completion, Daniel received an unexpected visitor. Commander Zalth, now stripped of his rank and held under guard. He asked to speak with Daniel privately. Against his better judgment and the advice of his security team, Daniel agreed. They met in a secured room with armed guards, standing just outside. I should hate you, Zalth said without any greeting. You humiliated me. You destroyed my plans. You represent everything weak about the universe. And yet here you are, wanting to talk. Daniel replied carefully, staying alert for any threat. I watched the recordings of your fleet fighting my ships. They fought with precision and coordination that matched our best tactics. They adapted to our weapons during the battle. Zalth's mouth parts clicked in frustration. You are not weak. I was wrong about that. So what happens now? Now I go to trial and probably spend my life in exile. But before that happens, I needed to understand something. How did you know about my plan? Was it Vren? Daniel thought about lying but decided honesty might be more valuable. Yes, he came to us because he believed peace was possible and your attack would destroy that chance. A scholar defeating a warrior without ever drawing a weapon. Zalth's tone was bitter and angry. Perhaps that is the future. A world where cunning matters more than strength. I am not suited for such a future. The future needs both, Daniel said seriously. Warriors, to protect what matters. And thinkers, to decide what's worth protecting. You just chose the wrong thing to protect. One of Earth's diplomats, a woman named Susan Carter, made a suggestion. We should name it after this station. The Haven Point Accords. We nother hain. We nother enstapso. It sounds peaceful and hopeful. No, Kreth said firmly, his voice cutting through the murmurs of agreement. This station is neutral ground, but it is not what brought peace. The treaty should reflect the truth of how it came to be. What do you suggest, War Master? Daniel asked, curious about what the alien leader had in mind. Kreth looked directly at him with all four eyes focused. The Treaty of Survival. Because that is what we both fought for. The survival of our species. Not honor, not glory, not conquest. Simplest survival. There was something deeply profound in that statement. It stripped away all the military pride and political posturing. After a long moment of consideration, Daniel nodded slowly. I can agree to that. It's honest. The other human diplomats looked uncertain, but they followed Daniel's lead. The Vakreen representatives clicked their agreement. The treaty had its name. The signing ceremony took place 3 days later. Representatives from both species gathered in the main hall of Haven Point. Fleet Admiral Gregory Stone arrived from Earth, looking tired but hopeful. Members of the Vakreen High Council came as well, their crystalline armor gleaming under the station lights. As Daniel prepared to sign his name to the document that would end 3 years of terrible war, he thought about all the lives lost to reach this moment. The colonies that had been destroyed, the ships vaporized in combat, the families torn apart by loss and displacement. Peace couldn't bring any of them back, but it could make sure their sacrifices weren't meaningless. He took the writing instrument and signed his name carefully. Kreth signed next, his clawed hand making precise marks. The war was over. Afterward, there was a reception where humans and Vakreen mixed awkwardly but peacefully. People from both sides tried to make small talk, despite not understanding each other's cultures very well. It was uncomfortable and strange, but it was peaceful. That alone made it valuable. Admiral Stone pulled Daniel aside during the reception. You did well, Ambassador. Better than anyone expected or hoped. I almost got killed in single combat and nearly triggered another war by trusting an alien scholar I barely knew. I'm not sure that counts as doing well. Stone smiled slightly, a rare expression on his weathered face. Diplomacy is just war by other means. You understood that and adapted to the situation. That's all anyone can ask for. As the reception continued with its awkward but genuine attempts at friendliness, Daniel stepped out onto an observation deck. He needed a moment alone to process everything that had happened. Claire found him there a few minutes later. Your daughter is on the communication line, she said gently. She wants to talk to you. Daniel's heart filled with warmth as Amy's face appeared on the small screen Claire handed him. His daughter was crying, but she was also smiling bigger than he'd seen in years. Dad, they're saying the war is over. Is it really true? It's true, sweetheart. You can come home now. When will you be back? Her voice was full of hope and relief. Soon. Very soon. I promise. As the call ended, Daniel looked out at the stars through the large viewport. Somewhere out there, Vakreen worlds were celebrating or mourning the peace, just as human worlds were. The peace was fragile, built on mutual exhaustion and uncertain trust between former enemies. But it was peace. And after 3 years of brutal war, that meant everything. Scholar Vren found him at the viewport a few minutes later. Together, they watched as a human transport ship and a Vakreen freighter docked at the station side by side. These were the first civilian vessels to arrive since the treaty was signed. The first of many, I hope, Vren said quietly. The first of many, Daniel agreed. The war had ended not with a great military victory but with a difficult choice. The choice to survive together, rather than die fighting each other. It wasn't the ending anyone had expected when Daniel first boarded that Vakreen transport ship weeks ago. It wasn't glorious or dramatic, but sometimes the best outcomes are the ones nobody saw coming. 3 months later, Daniel stood on Mars at the main spaceport. He watched as Amy ran toward him across the landing pad, her bag bouncing on her back. She crashed into him with enough force to nearly knock him over, wrapping her arms around him tightly. I missed you so much, Dad, she said into his shoulder, her voice muffled by his jacket. I missed you too, sweetheart. More than you know. They walked together toward the transport that would take them back to Earth. Really home this time. Not just another shelter or temporary station. Earth was being rebuilt. People were returning to their lives. The future was uncertain, but it existed again. Daniel's personal communicator made a soft chiming sound. A message from Scholar Vren appeared on the screen. The first joint colony is being established in the Meridian system. My daughter has been accepted into the science program there. She asks if any humans will be studying with her. I told her I knew one human who might have a daughter interested in science. If this is true, perhaps they could meet. The future begins with the next generation. Does it not? Daniel smiled and typed a quick reply. Amy would love that. Let's arrange a meeting soon. He showed the message to Amy as they walked. Her eyes lit up with excitement. Really? I could study with an alien? That would be amazing. The universe is opening up again, Daniel said. You can do anything you want now. As they boarded the transport, Daniel looked back at Mars one last time. The red planet had been a refuge during the darkest days of the war. Now it was just a waypoint on the journey home. The transport lifted off smoothly, carrying them toward Earth. Through the viewport, Daniel could see other ships, human vessels, Vakrine vessels, even some from other alien species that had stayed neutral during the war. They all moved through space peacefully, going about their business without fear of sudden attack. Dad? Amy asked, pulling him from his thoughts. Yes, sweetheart? What you did, negotiating peace. Was it scary? Daniel thought about the question carefully. Terrifying. Every single moment. But you know what I learned? What? Sometimes being scared and doing the thing anyway is the bravest choice you can make. And sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought with weapons. They're fought with words, trust, and the willingness to take risks for something better. Amy considered this seriously. Do you think the peace will last? I don't know. Daniel admitted honestly. It's fragile. Built on hope and exhaustion more than anything solid. But that's why people like you matter so much. Your generation will decide if this peace becomes permanent or if it falls apart. You'll build the relationships, create the shared culture, make the connections that turn fragile peace into lasting friendship. No pressure then, Amy said with a small laugh. You'll do fine. Better than fine. You'll do things my generation never imagined. The transport entered Earth's atmosphere, and through the clouds, Daniel could see the planet below. Cities were still being rebuilt. Scars from the war remained visible from orbit. But lights were on. People were living, working, building. Life continued. The future was uncertain, built on a peace that could still fail. Treaties could be broken. Trust could be betrayed. Old hatreds could resurface. 6 months after the Treaty of Survival was signed, Daniel stood in his office on Earth, looking at reports from the 12 joint systems. The arrangement was working better than anyone had dared to hope, though not without problems. There were disputes almost daily. Cultural misunderstandings. Arguments over resource allocation. Tension between human settlers and Vakrine workers. But nobody was shooting at each other. That alone felt like a miracle. Claire knocked on his door and entered carrying a thick folder. The latest incident reports from the Meridian system. 3 disputes this week. 2 resolved peacefully. 1 required arbitration. What was the third one about? Daniel asked, taking the folder. A human construction team and a Vakrine engineering crew both claimed the same building site. Apparently, there was confusion about the zoning maps. It got heated. But the local council stepped in before it became physical. Daniel read through the report carefully. A year ago, such a dispute would have been settled with weapons fire. Now it was settled with paperwork and compromise. Progress came in strange forms. How's Amy doing at the academy? Claire asked, changing the subject to something more pleasant. Daniel smiled, the expression coming easily when he thought of his daughter. She loves it. She sent me a message yesterday. She and Vren's daughter, Kessa, are working on a joint research project about compatible agriculture, trying to find crops that both species can eat. That's ambitious for first-year students. They're determined to prove that cooperation works on every level. Daniel set down the report. Sometimes I think the young people understand peace better than we do. They don't carry the weight of the war the way we do. His communicator chimed with an incoming call. The screen showed it was from War Master Kreth. Daniel accepted the call. and the Vakreen leader's image appeared. Ambassador Price, I hope I am not disturbing you. Not at all, War Master. What can I do for you? I wanted to inform you personally before the official announcement. The Vakreen High Council has voted to establish a permanent embassy on Earth. Similarly, we would welcome a human embassy on our capital world, Vakros Prime. Daniel felt a surge of satisfaction. Permanent embassies meant both sides were committed to long-term peace. That's excellent news. When will this happen? Within 3 months. The Council has also requested that you serve as Earth's first ambassador to Vakros Prime. If you are willing. The offer caught Daniel by surprise. Living on an alien world, surrounded by Vakreen culture, far from everything familiar. It would be difficult and challenging. It would also be the most important diplomatic post in human history. I'm honored, War Master. But I need to discuss this with my daughter before I can accept. She's finally settled into a normal life here. I have Induspan. Well, he towns of Depeckard. Also base Tamris. I'm Hevedin, War Master. Of course. Take the time you need. But know that the Council specifically requested you. They trust you. Which is not something Vakreen give lightly. After the call ended, Daniel sat in silence for a moment. The opportunity was enormous, but so was the sacrifice. He would be asking Amy to uproot her life again, just when she'd found stability. That evening, he called Amy at the academy. When her face appeared on the screen, she looked tired, but happy. Her hair was messy from long hours in the laboratory. Hey Dad, what's up? I need to talk to you about something important. I've been offered a position, ambassador to Vakros Prime, but it would mean moving there. Living on a Vakreen world. Amy's eyes widened. Seriously? That's incredible. It would also mean you'd have to leave the academy, leave Earth again, adapt to a completely different environment. Dad, are you kidding? Do you know how amazing this would be for my studies? Kessa has been telling me about Vakreen botanical science. If I could study there directly, learn from their scholars? Amy's excitement was genuine and infectious. When do we leave? Daniel laughed, relief flooding through him. You're sure? This isn't like moving to Mars. This is living among aliens. I've been working with Kessa for months. Vakreen aren't as different as people think. They value family. They care about their work. They worry about the future, just like us. Amy paused. Besides, someone has to show them that humans can adapt to anything. Might as well be us. 7. When did you get so wise? I learned from watching you negotiate peace while fighting an alien warrior. Kind of set the bar high for problem solving. 3 months later, Daniel and Amy boarded a transport ship bound for Vakros Prime. The journey would take 2 weeks through the jump gates. The ship was a joint venture, crewed by both humans and Vakreen. Watching the mixed crew work together efficiently was another small miracle of the new peace. Jake Collins and Peter Wright, Daniel's original security detail, had volunteered to accompany him to Vakros Prime. They stood near the boarding ramp as Daniel and Amy approached. Couldn't let you go to an alien world without proper protection, sir, Jake said with a slight grin. I appreciate it, though I'm hoping we won't need much protecting. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst, Peter added. Standard procedure. The journey to Vakros Prime was smooth and uneventful. Daniel spent much of the time studying Vakreen language and customs. Amy spent her time in the ship's laboratory, already making friends with the Vakreen science officers. When they finally approached Vakros Prime, Daniel stood at the observation window with Amy beside him. The planet was beautiful in an alien way. 3 small moons orbited it. The continents were visible through wispy clouds, showing purple and orange vegetation instead of Earth's green. It's so different, Amy whispered in awe. That's what makes it worth seeing, Daniel replied. The landing ceremony was formal and elaborate. War Master Kreth himself was there to greet them, along with dozens of high-ranking Vakreen officials. Their crystalline armor gleamed in the light of Vakros Prime's orange sun. Welcome to Vakros Prime, Ambassador Price. Kreeth said through the translation device. You are the first human to officially set foot on our home world. It is a historic moment. Kreeth, I'm honored to be here, War Master, and I hope I'm the first of many. That is our hope as well. Kreeth turned to Amy. And this must be your daughter. Scholar Vren's child, Kessa, has spoken of her often. She is eager to show her our universities. Amy stepped forward and performed the Vakreen gesture of respect she had been practicing. It was a complex movement involving hand positions and a slight bow. Kreeth's mandibles spread in approval. You have studied our customs. That shows respect. I want to learn everything I can, Amy said. About your people, your science, your world. Over the following weeks, Daniel settled into his role as ambassador. The embassy was a newly constructed building that blended human and Vakreen architectural styles. It looked strange but somehow worked, much like the piece itself. His days were filled with meetings, negotiations, and cultural exchanges. Small problems arose constantly. A human trader insulted a Vakreen merchant without realizing it. A Vakreen security officer detained human visitors for a minor violation of local law. Every incident required careful handling to prevent escalation. But there were victories too. A human medical team and Vakreen healers collaborated on a treatment for a disease that affected both species. A joint artistic exhibition showcased human paintings alongside Vakreen crystal sculptures, showing that beauty transcended species. Trade agreements were signed that benefited both economies. One evening, Daniel attended a formal dinner with members of the Vakreen High Council. The food was strange, some dishes barely edible to human taste, but he made an effort to try everything. It was during this dinner that Council member Thren, an ancient Vakreen with pale, worn armor, asked him a direct question. Ambassador, do you believe this peace will last? Truly? No. We consus, and said. I'm will go. We consus, and said by. Daniel considered the question carefully. Everyone at the table stopped talking to hear his answer. I believe peace is not a destination but a constant effort. Every day, people from both our species make choices. Small choices mostly. To cooperate instead of compete. To understand instead of judge. To build instead of destroy. Daniel paused. Will there be challenges? Absolutely. Will some people try to restart the war? Probably. But as long as more people choose peace than choose war, it will survive. Thren's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. A diplomat's answer, but an honest one, the only kind worth giving. Amy thrived on Vakros Prime in ways Daniel hadn't expected. She attended university classes with Vakreen students, learning their methods of scientific inquiry. Her friendship with Kessa deepened into a genuine bond. She even started teaching basic English to young Vakreen, helping create the next generation of translators and diplomats. One day, she came to Daniel's office with excitement in her eyes. Dad, you have to see this. Kessa and I finished our project. She pulled out a data pad showing images of a hybrid crop. It's a combination of earth wheat and a Vakreen grain called thresh. It grows in both types of soil, requires less water than either parent plant, and both species can digest it. We're calling it Unity Grain. Daniel looked at the data with growing amazement. This is remarkable. Do you understand what this means? It means joint colonies won't have to ship as much food from home worlds. It means humans and Vakreen can literally share meals. It's practical cooperation. It's more than that. It's proof that our species can create something new together. Something better than what either of us had alone. The project drew attention from both governments. Within months, Unity Grain was being tested in the joint systems. Early results were promising. Amy and Kessa became minor celebrities, symbols of successful cooperation between species. But not everyone was happy about the peace. A year into Daniel's posting on Vakros Prime, there was an incident. A group of Vakreen extremists, loyal to the imprisoned Zalth, attempted to bomb the human embassy. They were caught before the attack, but it served as a stark reminder that peace had enemies. Daniel stood in the damaged embassy entrance, where the bombs had been discovered and defused. Kreth arrived personally to inspect the scene. "I apologize for this, Ambassador. These radicals do not represent the Vakreen people. I know that, War Master. Just as human extremists who protest the peace don't represent humanity." Daniel looked at the explosive devices being carefully removed by security. "But we can't ignore that these people exist. What do you suggest?" "Transparency. Don't hide this incident. Announce it publicly. Show that your government stopped the attack and will prosecute those responsible. Demonstrate that Vakreen leadership is committed to protecting humans, not harming them." Kreeth considered this. "That is not the traditional Vakreen approach. We usually handle such matters quietly. Peace requires new approaches. Show your people that this peace is worth defending, even from your own extremists." Kreth followed the advice. The announcement was made publicly, and the arrested conspirators faced trial in open court. It was uncomfortable for Vakreen leadership to admit that some of their own people opposed peace, but it sent a powerful message about commitment to the treaty. The incident had an unexpected positive effect. Moderate Vakreen, who had been quietly uncertain about peace, saw their government actively defending it. Support for the treaty actually increased. 2 years into his assignment, Daniel received news from Earth. Admiral Gregory Stone had passed away peacefully in his sleep. The old warrior had lived just long enough to see the peace he helped create take root. Daniel attended the memorial service via video link from Vakros Prime. Speakers talked about Stone's military career, his strategic brilliance, his dedication to protecting humanity, but Daniel remembered something else. The tired admiral, who had been brave enough to choose negotiation over continued warfare, even when victory was uncertain. After the service, Daniel recorded a message that was added to Stone's memorial archive. Admiral Stone understood something crucial: that the greatest victory is not defeating your enemy, but finding a way to turn them into something other than an enemy. He gave me the chance to attempt peace when war seemed certain. That decision saved millions of lives on both sides. His legacy isn't just the battles he won, but the war he chose to end. Amy found him after the recording, knowing he would need company. They sat together in the embassy garden, a small green space that Daniel had created as a reminder of Earth. "Are you okay, Dad?" "I'm sad, but also grateful. Stone gave us all a gift. He gave us a chance for something better. Do you think he'd be proud of what we've built here?" Daniel looked around the garden, then up at the alien sky of Vakros Prime. "I think he'd be amazed. And yes, proud." Abing not name, Kadagman. As the years passed, the peace deepened and matured. The joint systems thrived. Human Vakreen marriages began to happen, requiring new legal frameworks that neither species had anticipated. Children grew up speaking both languages, comfortable in both cultures. Daniel served as ambassador for 5 years total, before finally requesting a transfer back to Earth. He was tired, older, ready for a quieter life. Amy chose to stay on Vakros Prime, now a respected scientist working on interspecies cooperation projects. On his last day, Kreth hosted a private dinner for Daniel. Just the two of them, without assistants or translators using their own learned languages to communicate directly. "You have changed many things, Daniel Price," Kreeth said, his mastery of English now quite good. "We changed things together, War Master. I couldn't have done any of this alone. Do you remember when we first met? When I asked if your courage came from bravery or desperation?" "I remember. I have thought about that answer many times. I believe now that all great changes require both. Desperation to try something new, and bravery to see it through." Kreth paused. "You possessed both. So did I. That is why we succeeded. What comes next, do you think? For both our peoples?" Continuation. Growth. Probably some setbacks and conflicts. But the foundation is strong now. Others will build on what we started. Daniel raised his glass in a toast. To the future, then. Whatever it brings. To the future, Kreth agreed. Daniel returned to Earth and retired from diplomatic service. He moved to a quiet house in the countryside, finally able to rest after years of tension and responsibility. But he stayed involved in peace efforts, advising the next generation of diplomats, writing about his experiences, helping train those who would continue the work. Amy visited twice a year, bringing Kessa with her. The two friends had become like sisters, their bond a living symbol of what humans and Vakreen could become together. 10 years after the Treaty of Survival was signed, Daniel received an invitation to a ceremony on Haven Point Station, the same place where the treaty had been formalized. He almost declined, feeling too old for such travel, but Amy convinced him to attend. When he arrived at the station, he found it transformed. What had been a simple diplomatic facility was now a thriving hub. Hundreds of humans and Vakreen lived and worked there, permanently. Schools, laboratories, businesses, all operating in cooperation. The ceremony was the unveiling of a monument. A massive sculpture showing a human and a Vakreen reaching toward each other, hands almost touching. At the base were the names of everyone who had died in the war. Millions of names from both sides. Kreeth was there, older now, his armor showing new scars from age rather than battle. They stood together as the monument was revealed. "We built this on graves," Kreeth said quietly. "We must never forget that." "No," Daniel agreed. "But we also built something that makes those deaths mean something. We gave them purpose by choosing to stop adding to their number." A young human girl, no more than 10 years old, approached them shyly. Behind her stood a young Vakreen of similar age. "Excuse me," the girl said. "Are you Ambassador Price and War Master Kreth? The ones who made the peace?" "We are," Daniel said gently. "We're doing a school project about the treaty. Can we ask you some questions?" Daniel and Kreth spent the next hour talking with the children, answering their questions about the war and the peace. The children didn't remember the war. To them, human Vakreen cooperation was normal. That, more than anything, showed how far they had come. As the ceremony ended and crowds dispersed, Daniel stood alone at the monument, reading names. So many names. Each one a person with a life, with family, with dreams that had ended in violence. "I hope we honored you," he said quietly to the names. The monument offered no answer, but Daniel felt a sense of peace, nonetheless. The work was done. The foundation was laid. The future would be built by others. Now, he had kept his promise to Amy, made years ago in that desperate time. He had helped create a world where she could live without war, where her generation could imagine possibilities his generation never could. Sometimes, that was enough. Sometimes, that was everything. As Daniel prepared to return to Earth for the final time, he looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, humans and Vakreen were working together, building together, living together. Not perfectly, never perfectly, but together. The war had ended with a choice to survive. The peace continued with a choice to thrive. And that made all the difference. But for the first time in 3 years, Daniel allowed himself to feel something he thought he'd lost. Hope. Sometimes hope was enough to start with. From hope came effort. From effort came progress. From progress came change. The war was over. The real work of building peace was just beginning. And as Daniel held his daughter's hand during the landing, he knew that work would be worth every challenge it brought. The future belonged to the next generation now. His job was done. Theirs was just beginning. Zalth stood to leave, then stopped at the door. "For what it is worth, Ambassador, you fought well in our duel. You saw what I expected and used it against me. That is something I can respect, even in an enemy. We're not enemies anymore, Commander. That's the whole point of what we're doing here. After Zalth was taken away by guards, Daniel returned to the final negotiating session. The treaty was almost complete. One last issue remained. What to call it? At least this way we have a chance to stop it. Stone was quiet for a moment. All right. The Fifth Fleet will move into position. But they won't attack unless Zalth's forces attack first. We're not starting this fight. We have that monist. We have the port won. Understood. And Admiral, make sure our ships are visible. I want Zalth to know we're there. Sometimes, the best way to stop a fight is to show you're ready for one. The next 48 hours were tense and difficult. Daniel could do nothing but wait and hope their plan would work. Claire kept him updated on fleet movements, showing him how Earth's ships were carefully positioning themselves along Zalth's projected routes. You cannot win, Zalth declared. Your weapons cannot pierce our armor. Your strength cannot match ours. Give up now, and I will make it quick. Daniel pushed himself up, breathing hard. Zalth was right. Direct attacks were useless. He needed to think differently. What did humans have that Vakreen didn't? Then he noticed the sand under his feet and remembered something Vren had said earlier about humans using enemy weapons against them. As Zalth charged again, Daniel didn't retreat. Instead, he dropped low and kicked a massive cloud of sand directly into Zalth's 4 eyes. Hat earns us the right to speak. A wave of clicking sounds echoed through the room. Daniel couldn't tell if they were angry or impressed. Kreth's eyes got narrow. Bold words. Your species fights well, I admit. Like trapped animals with nothing left to lose. Kreth stepped down from his platform. But you are still animals, and the Vakreen are hunters. Then let me speak plainly, Warmaster. Animals that cost too much to hunt aren't worth hunting. How many of your warriors have died? How many ships have you lost? This war is draining your empire. Daniel had just said the one thing no one was supposed to say out loud. The room went completely silent. He had either made the biggest mistake of his life, or the smartest move possible. In a few seconds, he would find out which one it was.